Hello, I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Welcome to this week's History is Lunch program, which is sponsored by the John and Lucy Shackelford Charitable Fund of the Community Foundation for Mississippi. We're in our home, the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium, in the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Tune in next week for History is Lunch when we'll hear from Jim Crockett about his new University Press of Mississippi book, Rulers of the SEC, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, 1959 to 1966. During that 8-year stretch, the two schools won 12 of the 24 conference titles for football, baseball, and basketball, ahead of such powerhouses as Alabama, Kentucky, and LSU. With the kickoff of the SEC football season upon us, we thought it would be a fun time to have that program. Today, we are delighted to welcome Suzi Altman, who will present Saving a Folk Art Icon, Margaret's Grocery. Brandon resident Suzi Altman has been a professional photographer for more than 30 years. Her work has been printed in the London Observer, New York Times, New York Post, and USA Today, among other publications. Her photographs are in the permanent collections of Washington, D.C.'s National Museum of Women in the Arts and the Mississippi Museum of Art. Altman is the founding director of the Mississippi Folk Art Foundation and the creator of the New Miss brand with civil rights leader James Meredith. Suzi Altman, thank you for being with us today. We're excited to have you. Tell us about Margaret's Grocery.
Chris, thank you for having me here today, and welcome everybody this afternoon. First, before I tell you a little bit about the grocery, I'd like to start off and thank everybody for making this possible. Mississippi Department of Archives and History, the Mississippi Humanities Council. This will only take about a minute, then we'll get to the good stuff. Mississippi Heritage Trust, the 10 most endangered places list of Mississippi, Nancy Branton, Linda Hess, Rhonda and David Day, the Maxwell family and the Cool Springs Church, Betty Shornick and the Shornick Family Trust, Jane Hyatt, Mayor Flags, Zach Godshall, Ali Colleen Neff, and of course, Reverend and Margaret Dennis and Reverend's daughter, Cora Dennis, Spaces Archive, the Souls Grown Deep Foundation, and the Kohler Foundation. Again, thank them all without them, this project wouldn't even exist, because this is a team effort to make this happen. I met Reverend Dennis and Margaret in 2001 and quickly fell in love with them and their message. Their message is God doesn't have no black church. He doesn't have a white church. He has one church where we're all welcome. And their message of love and inclusion really struck a chord with me when I first moved to Mississippi. And I think it's still very vital and important of why we preserve it. It's our mantra. I quickly fell in love with them and decided over the years that I photographed them for about 10 years. And I made Margaret a promise on when she got sick that I would take care of Preacher. And when Preacher got sick and he was in the nursing home, one day he was calling out, Suzi, promise me you'll take care of my castle. And well, I promised, and I wasn't sure what I was promising. And the impetus for him building the castle for Margaret was when he met her in 1979. He said, Margaret, if you marry me, I'll build you a castle to our love. And he turned once was her grocery store that serviced the King's community since the 1950s into this fabulously beautiful, multicolored roadside attraction. And he said he used all the colors in the palette that God used in the world, and that's why there were all those colors on his place. And he thought, if it was that colorful, you might stop for a minute and catch your eye, and he would have a chance to share a word of the Bible with you, maybe, and share his thoughts with you. Over the time, the place has obviously fallen into disrepair, and that's how the Folk Art Foundation was started to restore and protect Margaret's Grocery. And we have this short oral documentary entitled The Oral History of a Southern Vernacular Palace that we're about to view. And I appreciate you all tuning in today. And I'm going to give it back to Chris now. Oh, we have one issue with sound on the film because it's our rough cut that we asked Chris to turn the volume up on some areas. Preacher's a little hard to hear. So I apologize for that. So you're going to have to turn it down maybe on your end. As I said, it's a rough cut. Please watch it to the end because there's a little lanyard at the end. Preacher's got a little extra for something for you at the end. Again, thank you everybody for today, and I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you, Chris.
All right, we'll get this film going, and then after it's over, we'll come back and take questions with Suzi.
Have you ever heard the story of Margaret's grocery?
I built it house because I love Margie.
It's been over 50 years. So it's important because it is part of history. It was beginning to really be an eye catcher after her marriage. It was sort of a gathering place for the older people. I never did think about it a lot except that it was just a grocery until it started taking a different form.
He asked me, said, Margaret, you marry me? So I turned your little store into a castle. He said, I said, to a castle? He said, yeah. He said, I turned it into a castle. I fixed it. The reason why he built it like this, he wanted to catch people's attention when they passed by and stop. They would stop to see it and say, Margaret, I get to tell them about the Lord.
Before she married Reverend Dennis now, she didn't have all that artwork up there in that stove. Am I right? She didn't have all that artwork up there in that stove before she married Reverend Dennis. But after she married, when her husband got killed, her first husband got killed, and of course I don't think they ever found out who killed Rogers. But after her first husband got killed and she married Reverend Dennis, well, we always say she married a character. Now, Miss Margaret with the work she did, and Dennis with the work he did. I mean, those people did a lot of community work, church work, neighborly. You know, they were just good people. Mm-hmm. As far as she was concerned, there may have been a different color skin, but there were not different people. We were all one, and that's the way she felt about it. In fact, that's the way it should be with everybody. And she tried to teach that. She talked about that. And she told that in that store up there. She told it down here in this church. And she would always, she just wanted to see things move forward, but she always wanted to see them move in the right direction. And she always said that was the way God wanted things to be. She was a God-sent woman. She was just a God-sent woman.
Well, Margaret Grocery was the epitome of what Vicksburg should have been then and always will be if I'm the mayor. I just don't believe we had two Vicksburg. It's not the tale of two cities. What it was is that it was one Vicksburg, it was one people, it was one church, it was one destiny. And that's what Reverend Denny and Mrs. Margaret represented. Blacks, white, Republican, Democrat went into that store because they got a greater appreciation of not only the art, but the hospitality they possess. And it was so colorful, and it was just the most beautiful piece of art you ever want to see.
I'm sure that when he began his work, it was a great curiosity to the community of Kings, and as you go out 61 North and through Waltersville, I'm sure that people wondered exactly what was going on there. But once I finally stepped foot on the grounds, I realized that it was a place of great reverence and that it was a very special place.
Well, first of all, Reverend Dennis did this so it can continue. He wanted his message to continue. Reverend Dennis's place was unique because when you come in on Highway 61, you would take that road and there would be this red and white building that looked like Legos, and it was creeping up to heaven. And people would come from all over the world to come visit them and to hear what Reverend Dennis had to say, what he had to share. His place was the most unusual place I've ever been. But he made it magical. If you walked in, you were in this place that you could turn the lights on and all these colors were going around you, and you became part of their world.
He put so much stuff on the outside till everybody passed and wanted to stop and look. And she was generous enough, nice enough to let them come in and see whatever, he had there and just look around. But Reverend Dennis didn't want him to just look. Reverend Dennis wanted to talk to him. He wanted to preach to him. He wanted to show him his artwork. He wanted to tell them about the Bible. And he wanted them to listen to him. Now, he loved that. Reverend Dennis and Mrs. Margaret both, they loved people. They loved mingling with people. They loved sharing with people, whether it was the Word of God or whether it was food or whatever they had. They loved people, and they loved sharing with people. That was just the type people. That was the type people they were. Beautiful people.
I would occasionally see the Dennises out here, and the first time I saw them out here, I stopped to talk to them, and I just fell in love immediately. I mean, they're just such, and I speak of them in the present tense because I still feel their spirit is around here. They're just such beautiful souls, and I just got so much enjoyment out of talking to them and hearing their tales and just watching the two of them interact with each other. It was just delightful.
This is a unique piece of art. This is a unique place to have that art. And it raises a great appreciation of art of its magnitude by having it at the location it is. You won't see this art nowhere else in the state of Mississippi and probably nowhere in this country.
And sin, but Jesus took me in. Said there is work to do, so I took the Master's hand and I joined the Christian band, and I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Yes, I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. His mother died at birth. His father was gone off from home, wasn't there, when he was born. And they said when they found him and his mother was dead, he was laying up by her. And the doctor said that she probably had been dead about 3 or 4 days when anyone found him. Some children were playing around the house, and they smelled odor, and they went back and told their parents. And they broke in and found him. And so his grandmother raised him up until he got 12 years old. And when he got 12 years old, she passed away. And so his father came and got him. And he was real cruel to Reverend Dennis. He would beat him, wanted to pick more cotton than he could pick, and just did him real bad until Reverend Dennis decided he was going to try to kill his father or he'd run off. So he decided he'd run off. And when he left home at night. And he had to walk a good long way, about 8 or 9 miles, before he got to a train station. And when he got to the train station, he didn't have any money to get on the train. So he went and got on the front part of the train. But at that time, they called him a cow catcher. It's on the front part of the train. He said he got up there, had little clothes in a bag, pillow slip, and say he put it on that cow catcher, and he got on top of it. When he got on top of it, he held onto it, and the train pulled off. And said, oh, if he had to ride about 9 miles on that cow catcher. And said, that wind just whooped him so bad in his face, but he knew he couldn't turn it loose. He just held on to it.
Take a picture of my work, and you see I don't lay brick like it. Oh, brick like it.
You got it.
You try to do it better than anybody else. Don't care what it is. I don't kill nobody. I always tell you, kill nobody. But whatever you do, you're better. Look at my reputation up here. You see my reputation there? Huh? I ain't ashamed. I ain't ashamed of my reputation. Church of Christ. That's whom I serve. The Church of Christ. I didn't get enough donation to build a church. The city of Vicksburg donated me that buck. And I took it and decorated it and made it a house for the bushman. Now that is not a church. I want to tell you that. The church is in you. You have well spoken. Come on in, bro. Now, yeah, these people just like you here.
Okay.
Get you a seat. I'm preaching the gospel. But you need to hear the gospel. You need to know you're doing it wrong. You drink it. You go into the gambling boat. You got 4 or 5 women. You don't care what you do. God is angry with you. Come on in here and hear the word. I don't have no black and white church. I want you to know that. And for one church.
That's right.
You know that?
Yes, sir.
And it's all color. Just like you see everything. When you see everything you go, I don't care where you go in the world, you're going to see different colors. Huh?
Yes, sir. You're right.
I know you know who this is, Reverend Dennis. This is one of my old pictures. And this is one of my sisters. Yeah. These 2 here is my nieces. They live in Jackson now. This niece, and this is a niece of mine. And this is my second husband's mother. And you see me with my dog. Y'all see so good. That's one of my nieces. They live in California. And this is my mother's picture. That's my life. This is my picture when me and Preacher got married. My name is Margaret Dennis, and I'm 91 years old. And the first thing I want to say, I believe in Jesus Christ with all my heart. Now, Reverend Dennis, his love for God and his love for his wife, and he's a very good husband, And so he said he loved me. He was gonna fix my little store for me, and he said I'm gonna make it a castle. At night, sometimes he was working here. I would help him something here at night. And in the daytime, he'd be out there laying bricks tonight. He told me, he said he would have vision at night. And the next day he'd get him do what his vision he said.
God will tell you how to do good things. Like He showed me how to do it. I have vision. What you call dream, but I have vision. And God showed me the vision of the whole world.
So he got out there and went to work, and some of the people asked me that. So he did a good job, didn't he? I said, well, he did pretty good. He did a good job in what he did. I said, but I wouldn't tell you it was a castle. I wouldn't tell you it's a castle. I said, but I'm satisfied with it.
Well, first of all, Reverend Denny and Miss Margaret is a legend in their own rights. They're part of our history.
This really was the only black-owned grocery in this community. For years, that was the only store around in this community for a long time. That store, I know it's been there ever since 1952 when I was born. Because my mother worked there. Like I said, that was the only black store that I knew about up in this area. And as far as the community, that store served this community, and it served this community well. And everybody that I know loved it then, and they would always go there. And if you didn't have the money to purchase what you wanted, she would always give you credit.
It was a great asset to this community. It's important because of what its true meaning was. What the legislature did is for the first time recognize Reverend Denny and Mrs. Margaret and Margaret Grocer for a number of things, because of their art, because of their historic value to the city of Vicksburg and to the state of Mississippi. And at the same time, we proclaimed that we wanted to make certain that that culture, that part of history would remain a part of our history in this state. So we reclaimed that for them. Well, I think restoring the grocery will bring a piece of art back into the community and back into its rightful place. And I'm a part of restoring as much as we can of African American history and any cultural that we can, because that's what's been missing in tourism. That's what's been missing around the state, that we don't capture the origin of art.
People like Reverend Dennis are unique, and when you lose them, you lose much of our soul. So I feel like it would be good for the state of Mississippi's soul to somehow showcase what he was about and why people came to Mississippi. It wasn't just for our antebellum homes and our wars, but it's for our people who cared about other people and wanted to embrace them.
Reverend Dennis and Margaret were no different than any of the other people who live on that road. It's just that he was a visionary, a man who believed in all men and all women and all races and all religions. We live in a part of the country that is still segregated in many ways, and although there's been great efforts and great strides made in integration, there's still black churches and white churches and black funeral homes and white funeral homes and black cemeteries and white cemeteries. But Reverend Dennis stood for one God and one church, and that was the Church of Humanity. And that is its primary, to me, one of the most importantly significant parts of what he established on the hillside there overlooking Cool Springs Church.
I think he was about unifying people. I think he wanted there strongly to be peace and for people to love each other, and he welcomed all Gentiles, all Jews, but he welcomed all people. And I feel like that there aren't many people who are that comes from within that has a message that has nothing tied to it. It's just about welcoming people, and he wanted, and I think our state should be about our welcoming people, and people of all, of course, all nationalities, all colors, all religions.
To save Margaret Rose, to restore Margaret Rose will be a tremendous asset, not only to the state of Mississippi, but to the city and for this world, because what it will do will re-energize the interest in art and art appreciation that came during the era in which the dynasty lived. This would make a giant, significant difference in tourism in the city of Vicksburg. We have 20,000 people come by way of riverboats to the city. 400,000 people come to our National Military Park. This will be another jewel access to this city, and it'll take tourism to another level.
You've had the preservation of outsider art and folk art through Earl and through Leslie Silver and through the many artists who have been represented here. All of that creative abundance can almost be capsulized into what Margaret stood for in the voice of one man who was not trained in art. He did not set out to make a roadside Americana installation that would become known around the world. He set out to build a castle for Margaret, and that is why it is so special, and that is why it deserves preservation, and that's why it still garners the attention that it gets today. Margaret's must be saved. It must be saved.
Creation that the preacher has come up with here is sort of a silent sermon in itself. Of course, with those bright colors, it's a loud, silent sermon. And the preacher says that there's a purpose behind all of it. The reason is to attract thousands of people to come see it. And they come. What do they say about it when they come in? It's what?
Oh, they say that my work here is designed different from anyone else.
And unless I miss my guess, most every one of those thousands of people who stop by Margaret's store from all over the world have gotten a dose of the preacher's message. But that's the other part of his purpose, to tell everybody that they have a purpose, and they need to find out what it is.
So many people got good gifts. Now, I want y'all to understand me. But they don't know what the purpose is for. And they don't do nothing with it, but waste it away.
You may accidentally stumble up on Margaret's store in Vicksburg, but if you stay long enough, you'll discover you have a purpose when you leave.
Anyone who ever went there, when they left, they would get in their car, and then Reverend Dennis would get out up front, and he would raise his hand up, and he would salute you, and he respected all the people, and you waited for that salute, and then you knew you could leave.
Sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I am found. I'm blind. Oh, thank God. I can see.
My head needs 9 with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely gives him as a fire of God. I said, He's God, heaven. And may God guide us all. We are God's children. Man! And look how I looked at it. You see how I fixed the old raggy bust up? Don't throw away nothing. Take it and make something out of it.
Susie, that was great. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great. Do you have anything you want to say before we get to some of the questions?
Oh, thank you so much for airing this today. I wasn't sure we were back live. And I wanted to mention that recently USA Today did an article on outdoor folk environments and was kind enough to actually feature Margaret's Grocery, but we are by far not the only one in the South. There are many other environments similar to ours, and it'd be really neat to connect the driving trail to all of them. There's Passaquan in Georgia, there's Finster's Garden in Georgia, there's Chauvin in Louisiana, then there's a lot of other interesting, and L.V. Hall's place out in Mississippi also.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of other folk art sites throughout the South, and Reverend Dennis wasn't the only one who made environments such as this, and that it takes a team effort to actually preserve these environments. There's a lot more involved than people think. For Margaret's Grocery, for instance, it doesn't look very good right now in its current state, but we have over 80% of all the ephemera and the art and the signs from the original site, including the school bus, in storage, in cold storage. So we are able to preserve it, and we're in the process right now of doing that. And thank you again for this opportunity.
So tell us a little bit about the Mississippi Folk Art Foundation and what the plans and hopes for the site are.
The Mississippi Folk Art Foundation was actually started as the Friends of Margaret's Grocery while Reverend Dennis and Margaret were alive, to try to figure out how to preserve the site. When I first met them, I just thought they were a lovely couple and the place was fantastic. I didn't realize what an important folk art site it was internationally.
Yeah.
And as years went by and then they passed, I kept learning more and learned that we needed to be a folk art, a nonprofit, a 501c3, to officially be able to go forward and protect the art and go looking for grants to protect the environment and be able to go forward. So the Mississippi Folk Art Foundation was officially formed with members of the local community in Vicksburg and members of the Cool Spring Church. And we are dedicated to saving Margaret's Grocery. And I'm the steward of the site. I have the grand honor of mowing the grass and tarping the building and stopping the roof from leaking. And
Right.
in this heat of Mississippi summer, I actually live in Brandon, but I drive to Vicksburg 2 or 3 times, if not more, a week in the heat to vent the bus, to make sure it doesn't melt. And, it's definitely a passion project of mine.
Yeah.
Somebody once said that I was as committed to saving it as Preacher was to building it.
What year did it cease operation as a store? Was it still?
Grocery, yes. Margaret Rogers Dennis, it was Margaret Rogers before she married Reverend Dennis. And she had the grocery store in the King's community from 1950 through 1979.
Yeah.
And while deconstructing the interior for preservation, we found on the wall a slot machine certificates and a jukebox certificate dating all the way from 1959. Each year she had to renew.
Yeah.
It was a nickel for her first year to rent it per month, and it went all the way through 1972. So I believe that the stores, when her first husband was murdered in the 70s in a robbery gone bad outside the grocery, and when Preacher came to town and he made her the promise, the offer, if you marry me, I'll build you this castle to our love. He, over the years, slowly started to turn, which was her grocery store in the King's community and the only grocery store in the King's community on Highway 61 for a number of years and serviced that community well into what later became this internationally known roadside attraction. And it's taken different forms and shape over the years. He's added to it, changed it a little bit, but the message and the theme have always been consistent, that all are welcome, and if you treat people with love and respect, they should do the same.
But was it a functioning grocery in the early 2000s when you met? Could you buy a Coca-Cola and nabs
No,
there?
sir.
Not by
No,
then. It had
sir.
already become sort of almost a
When I first
religious
met
site.
Preacher, and was introduced to them and rolled up them by accident as somebody directed me to visit them. I arrived, and upon this gentleman outside in seersucker pants with Mardi Gras beads and blue eyes and red splatter on the bottom of his pants, and I wasn't sure if it was paint or something else. And I was completely taken by it. And being from New York, and I was straight Yankee then, I had no experience in Mississippi.
Right.
I was a little leery to go inside, but followed him inside and met Margaret. And no, it was completely adorned at that time. The meat counter was decorated with art. The old scale had a Bible on it. He had adorned the inside of the grocery with Christmas lights. And he had a penchant for putting things either, people thought on wheels, that everything was on casters. But it turns out that lots of them are on spinners, but lots of the other spinning things are made out of bottle tops and pill top bottles. And he recycled everything. His motto was, don't throw it out. It all has a value. Keep it. You'll use it for something later.
Right.
And he lived by that.
When did the bus come on the scene? Do you know?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you for asking. The city of Vicksburg actually donated the bus to Reverend Dennis sometime in the mid-'70s, I was told.
Okay.
But I was also informed that it was an actual functioning school bus, and he used to drive people around from Vicksburg to Parchman so they could visit their relatives, and he would have a captive audience and would preach to them the entire time. Sometime around, can you imagine the stories? Sometime around the early 80s, he decided to park it on the site, pull out the steering wheel and the steering column and the driver's seat, put in a pulpit, and turn it into a church. Samuel Mockbee wrote about it and studied the site for a number of years regarding its architecture and used to send his students there. And he said, in regard to the bus, that it was the most significant sanctuary in the world that moved souls but didn't physically move. And as I said, it's in storage, and it still is our crown jewel. It is in magnificent condition.
Yeah.
And you can feel him when you walk on the bus. It's still, it's really a gem.
So, how did Margaret herself feel about the physical transformations to her store, to the site, and how much did she participate directly in making those changes?
Good, another great question. Lots of people think that he was the only artist of the site, but it turns out that it's not quite the truth. She was very involved, and as the time went by, he would have visions at night, as he said, and he would go out and paint and create. But she later also, pink became her favorite color, and she started to retouch up the bricks later in life and adding her color pink all around the place. And she would paint on the sign work also. She helped him paint the signs. And she was very involved in it and very supportive. She loved to greet all the visitors who came by from around the world. She was very soft-spoken and had a lovely manner about her. She was a very wise woman. She was she was ahead of her time. She spoke, was a member of the Cool Spring Church for over 60 years, and she taught Sunday school there regularly and taught women to read there in the 50s before it was fashionable.
Yeah.
So Margaret was a pillar of the King's community. And when Preacher came along, it was him who the King's community was just like, what's going on here was a little out of the ordinary for them. And it took a little bit for them to get used to Preacher. They loved Margaret. Margaret was entrenched in that community and that church.
Right.
And Preacher built his own church on the hill.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I visited recently, the Cool Springs Church is right down the hill from the grocery. I mean, they really are back to back.
Yes, sir. In the old days, the members of the church used to say that there's, in the back of the grocery, going towards the church, there's actually, in the wintertime, you can still see the trail. There's steps that went from the grocery to the church, and the kids used to run up. They said they can get up and back before the sermon and get some penny candy to get back to church, that they would. And in the olden days, I have a list of stories. I've recorded people's stories who would tell me that, and it's fantastic to hear how involved they were in their community and the contribution that they've made to the city and to the state. And it'd be an honor to be able to preserve it and to continue their message.
Yeah. Some of the some of the structures that are on the site are tall. I mean, not just stacked up, but built with masonry. What was the Reverend Dennis's background that let him sort of confidently do that? How did he learn to build things?
Reverend Dennis was a veteran of World War II and a prisoner of war, and he was actually captured and a prisoner, and he says that the Nazis taught him his masonry skills. And it's rather impressive because he has survived 100-mile-an-hour winds, tornadoes, a couple hurricanes, 7 inches of snow and ice last year, and his concrete and those structures still stand.
Yeah.
Regarding the tower on the site, when he was building it, back in the late 80s and early 90s when he was completing the tower, the city did stop by and ask him if he had a permit, and he said that God didn't tell him he needed a permit for it. And he continued on building his tower. That actually, when the nonprofit got control of the property and wanted to shore up the tower to make sure nobody would get hurt, we investigated. There's actually a sitting area and a Bible on the second story of the tower. So at one point in time, you could have climbed in there to have your own little private sanctuary and prayer session, and read the Bible, look at the bus, and see the site.
How about that? If any of our viewers have questions for Suzi, you can type those in the comment section of the live stream. We have a couple already. Sarah Campbell asks, Suzi, what is your vision for this documentary? So this is sort of really you call it an oral history. I mean, this is an early version of the piece, but what would you like for it to become?
This oral history, the oral history of a Southern vernacular palace was actually from a grant from the Mississippi Humanities Council. Thank you, Stuart Rockoff and Carol Anderson, for your help and support. And it was to get the community, ideally, the film I would like to hope would raise community awareness and support for the project and help educate folks on how important they were to the city and their site still is. Ideally, our plans for the site, we've had a few visions for what we would hope to happen to the site. And we are in the process right now of raising funds for a new roof, exploring grant opportunities, and speaking with the Kohler Foundation, who's has a family foundation charged with restoring these outdoor environments. And they have restored Passaquan and a few other environments in Chauvin around the United States. And it's a really tremendous opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that segues nicely into a question and comment from Deirdre Payne. I'll try to condense some, but she asks initially, how is it this work of art was not better preserved at its original location? Restoration is a poor substitute for the efforts of the original artists. If it was worthwhile, why couldn't it be preserved? This was an unusual and valuable work of art that is lost, yet there are other much less worthy structures being continually preserved in Mississippi to honor much less worthy people and events. Vicksburg exists, Deirdre is a Vicksburg native, Vicksburg exists because of its preservation focus. How was this not part of that process?
Deidre, thank you for that question. That's a great question, and a lot of it has to do with originally where it's located. Vicksburg embraces its antebellum history, its Civil War history, but they have omitted their cultural heritage history that has to do with the King's community. Our site has generated visitors from as far away as Tokyo. On an annual basis, I host people from out of the country to the site. I agree, Deidre, it has been a heartbreaking upward battle for us to preserve this site. Mayor Flaggs has been a supporter of this project from the beginning, but unfortunately, funding has been an issue, and because of where it is an issue. Currently, and always, I have wanted the site to be done in situ, which means to restore it where it sits in the community because I think it's imperative that it stays in that community, because cultural heritage and art are important for the foundation of an upbringing of any individual. And if you take the arts out of the community and you take this cultural heritage out of the community, you're lessening the opportunity of the people who live in the community. So currently, the plan that we have in place that we hope comes to fruition includes restoring that site to make it the show palace in place that it was and leave it as a park for the city of Vicksburg. And that would include restoring all the brickwork and signage that is out there. And that's our dream.
Yeah. And currently the Cool Springs Church owns the ground. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the signage that we saw some in the documentary, and what you were particularly drawn to or moved by or remember?
Yes, sir. If you happen to be driving down Highway 61 headed to either the Delta or to Vicksburg, and you happen to drive past this fantastically beautiful place, you probably would see the arch first that he designed.
Yeah.
And the arch is probably 24 feet tall, approximately 8 feet wide, and it says Margaret's Grocery on it. And directly behind that, placed on top of Margaret's Grocery, were these 8-foot by 4-foot huge signs with 7-inch letters that said, "Jews and Gentiles welcome. Come one, come all to Reverend Dennis's Bible study. We're open all the time." Throughout his site, there were signs referencing, good and evil, bad and, sins and sinners. Being Jewish, also from New York, it took me a little while to understand some of the Bible verses that were there, and I learned a lot from Reverend Dennis
Right.
and Miss Margaret. Not just about the Bible, though. They use as an example of how to live, how to be a better person, how to care about your community, how to be more involved with your neighbors. And again, I think those things are still vitally important, and that's why we do the work that we're doing. Those messages need to be carried forward.
Was there a significance to the phrase "home of the double-headed eagle" other than the small statue that?
Yes, sir. So a lot of stories, and if you would go visit Reverend Dennis, he had all these stories about the double-headed eagle and the Byzantine Empire. He was not just a Mason trained, but he was also a member of the Masonic Temple. But to him, the double-headed eagle represented being protected from the east and protected from the west, that he was looking both directions and he had protection from both directions. And it dates back to biblical times. And again, when we were cleaning the site to protect the inside, I found his old original high school history book, and it was all dog-eared with all those little stories and notes. Okay, Margaret, you need to read this over here. So the stories that he told actually had historical significance and were grounded in history.
Could you talk to us a little bit about your relationship with the Dennises? I mean, you spent years and years and years with them on a regular basis. Tell us a little bit about your friendship with them.
They're family. I met them in 2001. Again, when I first moved to Mississippi, very naive about the South and about Bogart and the Delta. And I was very smitten with what I saw. And I've been a photographer at that time. I've been a photographer 30 years now. So obviously it was very visual and I wanted to make pictures. But the more I went back and the more I spent time with them, the fonder I grew of them. They were happy. They were always happy. They always thought that they had enough. They always wanted to help others. They never were wanting for anything, except when they were older and had difficulty keeping their electricity on. She never complained, never thought they were poor, never thought that they lived a difficult life. And their circumstance of where they lived and how they lived their lives, you would have thought that maybe they would think differently. But they were the most loving, welcoming, honest, genuine people that I had met in years, and still feel that way about them. And they were always welcoming me into their home. And I continually went to visit them over a 10-year span. At least once a month, I brought everybody from my mom to my wife to go to meet them. People who lived in the state for 30 years or longer, their whole lives, residents of the state, didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
Didn't know this was in their backyard.
Yeah.
And if you went to visit him and when he was in good health on a hot summer day, and all over the interior of the grocery and the bus were all these donation boxes, old mailboxes, and said, please make a free donation. And if you filled up his donation box, he might give you a silver dollar and a Coke on a hot summer day. And I still have my original silver dollar that he gave me, and my mother has hers in her wallet. And it's a sacred space.
Yeah.
And I still feel that today. And I'd like to share that with the world.
Yeah, yeah. And, I mean, your relationship with the Dennises was such that as she was nearing the end, her concern with you was for, to help keep an eye on and to help with Reverend Dennis. And then when Reverend Dennis was nearing his end, his concern was for what was almost like their child, the site, and for you to help him, for that not to go away, for that to be preserved.
Yes, so that's the promise.
Right.
I intend to keep it. I visited Margaret in the hospital prior to her death, and I spoke at her funeral. She made me promise to look after him, and we did. And he lived on site in Margaret's grocery for a little while after she passed, and they were robbed. He was robbed while he was sleeping one night. And they came in and cut out the copper piping. We thought maybe it was time he moved to the nursing home permanently. And so we moved him to the nursing home. His facility was robbed again. We took over the site. What was I going to say? But yes, the promise. I'm sorry. The promise. Yes, so when Dennis got sick and he was in the nursing home, I promised him I would look after the site, not knowing exactly what I was promising. And I will continue to keep that promise. I've learned a lot along the way about preservation and stewardship of the property. And it's been a wonderful educational opportunity for not just me, but I think for the community going forward.
Yeah.
And I look forward to sharing more about the site and gifting it to the city hopefully someday.
Yeah. Well, and other organizations have joined with you in recognizing the significance of the site. The Mississippi Heritage Trust named it to its most endangered list a while back. Can you say a few words to viewers as we wrap up about how they can be involved and help preserve this?
Thank you. We have an on-running GoFundMe account. We have a Facebook page for the Mississippi Folk Art Foundation, one for Margaret's Grocery also, and then GoFundMe/Save Margaret's Grocery. We're a 501c3 tax donation. Donations may be tax deductible. Going forward, we have had a lot of interest in people wanting to help preserve the site from around the world. The site has been documented and written about from everybody from the Washington Post to the Souls Grown Deep Foundation to National Geographic to the Mississippi Arts Commission to the Mississippi Department of Archives and History started to have come out and surveyed the site also. Yeah. So we do have a lot of support. We just still need some more to get this project, completed. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share our message and to let people know how important this site is and their message of God doesn't have no black church. He doesn't have no white church. He has one church where we're all welcome. And if we treat people with love and respect, it'll make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that's my promise. I promise to save the site, and I promise to share their message.
Well, we appreciate you being with us today, for sharing the oral history and the beautiful photographs that you have taken over the years in the video.
Thank you, sir.
We look forward to following the progress on it. Thank you all for tuning in and watching this with us. I hope that you will join us again virtually next week for Jim Crockett and his book. For now, though, thank you, Suzi Altman. We'll look forward to hearing more about this in the future.
I hope to share updates soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Suzi.
Are you done?